What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Down the Wire. I'm your host, Brian Kostiw. We've got a great episode in store for you all today. We're going to talk about the latest with the New England Patriots' recent success, as well as the latest stories around the league. We'll also talk about the MLB and the potential for a salary cap coming in the near future, as well as a potential work stoppage. And then to end the show, we're going to talk about some Bryant sports. We'll talk about the Bryant basketball team who just played Virginia Tech last night and is set to face UConn this Sunday. And we'll also talk about the Bryant men's soccer team, who's ranked number 11 in the NCAA tournament poll, set to face the winner of Seton Hall in Siena this weekend. So it's going to be a great episode. We're glad to have you guys along with us today, and I'm glad to have on my first, guest of the evening. Glad to have him joining us today. It is Carter Santos. Glad to have an old friend of the program back on. Carter, how you doing?
I'm doing great, BK. Thanks for having me back on the pod. It's been a little bit of a hiatus for me in the podcast world, but I'm happy to be back, and got a lot of big news coming up. So I'm excited for the show tonight.
No, yeah, absolutely, man. I'm glad to have you back on, back in the broadcasting game. I know you were always big time with it when you were doing your the dog talk down at Bryant. So glad to have you back doing some sports talk here.
Yeah, happy to be back on the pod, and dog talk, man. That was where I got my start. It's forever in my heart. My first show, but happy to be on Down to the Wire tonight.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Carter, just to kind of start this off, obviously, we're both, big time New England Patriot fans. The Patriots this season really have exceeded all expectations that I would have thought for them coming into this year. You're coming off back to back 4-13 seasons. Things are really, looking like it can't be getting better anytime soon. You're coming off the Gerard Mayo firing after one season, and that was a disaster. And you bring in Mike Vrabel. You have the second year of Drake May. You bring in Josh McDaniels. And it's really everything has been clicking for them this year in a way that I didn't really think was possible for this team, even with the additions that you made of guys like Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins, and even making draft picks like Travion Henderson. I still didn't think that this would be the potential we would see for the New England Patriots this year. Just how shocking has this been for you as a fan?
I would say shocking. I knew that we were, in a better place than last year. I knew we were going to go, 3-4 wins. I knew we were going to be a little bit more competitive than that, but it's definitely surprising, I would say, that we are tied for the best record in the AFC. And I was just having a conversation with a coworker the other day. If you had told me the Broncos, the Patriots, the Steelers, and help me out here, who's leading who's the other division leader? The Colts. If you had told me those four teams would be leading their divisions right now, I would have thought you were nuts at the beginning of the season. In even New England, I knew that we were going to be competitive, maybe fighting for a wild card, but I still thought Buffalo was going to have that top spot there. But yeah, no, definitely surprising. And like you mentioned, I think it starts from the top, right? You got to start with Vrabel and McDaniels. What Vrabel and McDaniels right now, they just both look like they've had a complete resurgence. They both look like they're having fun out there. McDaniels is his play calling looks on point. Drake May is right under him on the offense. I would say obviously to contribute to the success we've had so far, and he looks very comfortable. And I contribute a lot of that to Josh McDaniels. I mean, I think this guy was born to be an OC. Didn't have the same success as a head coach, but has had huge success as coming back. For another go around here in New England. We love him. We love to have him back. I thought the Vrabel was a great hire in the first place. We needed that stabilizer who could kind of, keep the old New England fashion going, and then obviously turn the page into a new era. And I think he's done that beautifully so far.
Yeah, and Carter, I think if you had asked me if you had mentioned those teams and said that they were all leading their divisions, I think the question I would have asked is, what year do you think it is? Because growing up, if you're talking about like 2006, 2009, even into the mid 2010s, if you had said that those teams were leading their division, I would have totally believed you. You had either Peyton Manning on the Colts or the Broncos. Then you had the Andrew Luck year with the Colts. You would have had Big Ben down there, and obviously up here in New England, you would have Tom Brady doing his thing. So it's crazy to see these teams that really kind of defined that kind of success early on. Early on during my time as a fan, kind of gaining that traction again and getting back to that kind of a level. It's very interesting, especially with the, recent success we've seen from teams like the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Bills. It's weird to see that, these teams are now kind of back in that, top dog spot. So it is really interesting. And I think that, for me going into this year, I would have believed you if you maybe said around this point of the year, if you had said, what, the Patriots are going to be 6-4 by this time into the season. I could have seen that, with Mike Vrabel, there could have been a boost. And, if that was the case, I think Mike Vrabel would still be getting these Coach of the Year nods, just based on the fact that, he took a team that was, so downtrodden and had no belief in themselves, and he gets them a winning record, through 10 games of the season. He still would be getting all this praise. But then you're telling me that they're 9-2. They're, everything's looking up. Like, this is a different level, man. Like, it is unbelievable to see. So, I'm very impressed right now. I didn't think that Mike Vrabel was going to have this kind of an impact right away. We kind of saw how it all ended in Tennessee, and, he had success there getting them to an AFC championship game. But I would have thought there might have been maybe a little bit more of a, kind of a lull to start the career off. I thought there just wasn't going to be enough talent to get things going. And, they've hit it straight from Jump Street. It's been, a nonstop, just success. And, since they've gone on that run, it's been, unbelievable.
That's a great point, Brian, too. I mean, there was really no place else to go but up when you say, maybe if you can get, a couple games over 500, scratch into the wild card. I think Vrabel probably still would have been in that conversation for a Coach of the Year. But again, I think a lot of it has to attribute to McDaniels. And I mean, Drake's play, we can't not talk about that. Phenomenal sophomore season. You saw bits and pieces of it last year, how good he was with his legs, how he is able to extend plays in the era of dual threat quarterbacks. He fits the mold, but I think his downfield passing is one of the best in the league right now. Another guy I'd probably put up there with him in terms of downfield passing at the moment is Matt Stafford, but he's a major veteran in the league. I mean, he's mature beyond his years right now. And I would say the receiving core has totally taken 3 steps above from what we've seen in previous years. I was not sure what we were going to get out of Diggs. I think there were a lot of question marks coming in with him, especially the whole preseason, being on the boat and everything. It was like, okay, what are we going to get? Is this going to be like New England media is going to go off on him, kind of like a Cam Newton type of thing? But he is certainly, that Buffalo game was his resurgence of him being really dominant and getting you a win on the road, which was absolutely huge. And I think just overall downfield play of Booty, his ability to be a solid downfield threat. And I think Drake is making a lot of these guys look good. I mean, you could tell the quarterback play wasn't there. I mean, like Pop Douglas, for example, having a really, really nice year in there. Kind of going back to the tight end play action days. I love it. Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, looking like the old Gronk days, and we got to utilize that position. And the run game's been pretty solid too. I know Ramondre struggled early with the fumbles, but Henderson certainly has had a heck of a start in these last couple days. Last couple games, filling in there for Henderson with the toe injury. That Tampa Bay game, he was electric. Looking at the bench, asking Vrabel and the boys if he should actually score. Incredible, fun to watch, and the offensive line. I mean, I like to mention them. Not Cole Strains, Will Campbell, excuse me, on the left tackle there has been really doing well. He's had a couple of rookie moments, but you got to expect those. And just like the overall improvement there. I mean, basically a whole 4 new guys in that line. I think Onwenu is the only guy who was returning from last year. But I mean, to bring in Morgan Moses and guys like Garrett Bradbury on that line, huge veteran presence. And I mean, we all felt Will Campbell was going to have a presence the first day he walked into training camp in terms of what he said at the draft. So the offense has been great. But I mean, Brian, don't sleep on this defense too. Now, they've had some moments where these pocket passing quarterbacks, I feel like, have kind of shred them up a little bit, especially in the secondary. I know Rodgers had his way with them at times against when he played us in New England early this year. But what do you think about the defense so far?
The defense has been, I'd say it's had its ups and downs. It has surprised me. I thought it would have been, worse kind of going into this year, just based on the fact that you had so many new faces. But when you look at guys like Milton Williams, who I know is hurt for the time being, he's been a tremendous impact on this team. Guys like Christian Ellis, who maybe didn't think so much of, have been great additions. And then even someone like Kairos Tonga, who's bounced around from roster to roster, has been able to come in here and have an effective role on this team. And then when you look over to the secondary, you have Christian Gonzalez, who is is a legit lockdown corner. You have Marcus Jones, who is arguably one of the best slot corners in the game. And then unfortunately, you look at Carlton Davis. There's probably more to be desired there than what you've gotten with that contract. But I'd say all in all, like, this defense has been a plus for me this year.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Kairos Tonga and him coming in at fullback,
Yeah.
in some plays, lead
Well,
blocker. That's been fun.
Well, yeah, he's been coming in at fullback, and then something else that you mentioned, Carter, was Drake May and his ability and his passing ability, and his deep balls. It is so effortless for him. I mean, unfortunately, we kind of got stuck. After Tom Brady, we obviously knew what he could do. When he was able to throw the football, he had a great deep ball, especially in his prime, like when he was hooking up with Randy Moss in 2007 and those years. Like they were doing special things then. And like now, necessarily as he got older, you maybe didn't have as many deep threat guys, so you weren't really going there. But you even saw it in Tampa, like when Brady was hitting like Mike Evans on deep balls, things like that. So that wasn't even something that really went away with age for Brady, but it was something that kind of got taken out of the Patriots offense for a long time. I mean, you had it a little bit in 2017 when Brandon Cooks came in, but really for the most part, it was something that kind of was non-existent in the Patriots offense. They were kind of either dink and dunk, or they were maybe making, at most kind of, those 15-yard passes, nothing really beyond that. And they were kind of just like, it was kind of almost death by a thousand paper cuts if you were the other team. Drake May, however, is dropping it in the bucket from 40 yards out, making it look like he's throwing like a
Dimes.
10-yard out pass. It's
Absolute dimes.
unbelievable. And, that can't be understated. And, what's crazy, Carter, is like, we've been talking about like Drake May and his passing ability. Would you believe me if I told you that he hasn't passed for over 300 yards this season?
That is a crazy stat.
Yeah. The last game against the Jets, he passed for 281. He passed for 282 against the Browns. But, he hasn't passed for over 300 yards this season, and he's still being as effective as he is with those deep balls. And it's just showing that, he's not getting, like with, the lack of a run game that there was early on in the season. I know it's come on as of late, but it still hasn't been anything ridiculous. The fact that they're getting that kind of a contribution out of him is unbelievable, and that he's able to be, not just, effective on these deep balls, but he's taking advantage of it every single time. We had the one a couple weeks ago to Mac Hollins down in Tampa, and then you had, I think back to the Browns game when he dropped it, right over the, left shoulder of Kayshon Boutte in the end zone. It's unbelievable. And again, it looks so effortless when it comes out. It's, it's not like he's winding up and really getting into it like some of these other guys. He just, reaches back, just throws it a nice little dime, and it sits right where you want it to. It's pretty impressive. It's almost just like a good like pitching wedge shot, or even like a just a well placed golf shot. The way he's hitting these things.
No, I agree with you 100%. It looks so effortless for him right now. It's like he doesn't even break a sweat, But like I said, I contributed to McDaniel's play calling. And I think Drake's really, just every game he matures too, which is a good sign. Like you said, you mentioned he hasn't even passed for 300 yards. There's still that ability there too, I
Yeah.
believe. Now, whether, the league is wide open, like looking at this from a macro view, I still think that, the Pats need to get a little bit more battle tested. Now they have the Baltimore game coming up. That's when I have circled on my calendar after the bye week. That is going to be for me a huge telltale sign of where this team is in terms of, really getting a playoff opponent, right? Because I feel like they've taken care of business in terms of the teams that they know are below par and that they can, really go out there and get away with some things. I know the Atlanta game was kind of close, but I want to see him play the Bills again. Got Baltimore on the schedule, a team that and I think they've kind of had an up and down season so far, but I like to keep in mind is a very valid opponent is the Chargers. When you have Justin Herbert and his passing ability, I think that, that always will make me nervous in a playoff game. I mean, what do you think about, kind of going down the stretch of the season here? At what point does Vrabel start telling his guys, hey, we gotta get to that next level and face these, these tough teams, these tough quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, and even kind of put Bo Nix up there. And I mean, Daniel Jones doesn't scare me, and I won't put him in that category. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, listen, I think that those conversations have already happened, and I think that Mike Vrabel is the type of person where he's already, if those conversations haven't happened, he's like the type where he's just like gonna just already like have that instilled in these guys. These guys probably
Right.
went into week one with that mentality. I don't think Vrabel's the type that really switches things up and is like, oh shoot, like now we're doing much better than we should have. Like let's change it all up now and let's get serious. I think that it's been pretty even keel from Vrabel, I'd say, to start the year. Now maybe it's different in that locker room, but at least the way it's presented to the media is that it's kind of business as usual for this group. You mentioned the Baltimore game, and that's when I'm going to be a little bit more interested in than I would have been previously. And not just because it's Lamar Jackson and, they're a good team. Obviously, that's going to be something that's going to, you're going to have circled on your calendar. But I think, after seeing this last game against the Jets, and, you took care of business. Drake May finishes with 280 yards passing. You win what seemed to be handily, but it kind of was a sneaky close game in there, especially early on in that second half with the Jets threatening. And the one thing that the Patriots really weren't able to handle in that game was Justin Fields and his
Hmm.
rushing. The passing wise, Justin Fields, I just don't think, has what it takes at this point to be an NFL quarterback. It just doesn't look like the ability is there. If he wants, maybe he could be a backup somewhere. Maybe he can, provide that kind of a spark off the bench. But I think his time as a, NFL starter is probably over since this benching, at least in my opinion. But the one thing he did excel in this game was the rushing, and was the rushing game. He dominated them in the rushing game, and it really this defense was not able to stop him by any means. Passing wise, they knew he didn't have anything, and that's kind of the frustrating thing too, is that you knew he wasn't going to hurt you in the passing game. So you knew he was going to take off and run, but you still couldn't stop it. So I think when you look at someone like Lamar Jackson or even Josh Allen, who's going to be back on your schedule in just a few short weeks, that's something you're going to have to take notice of.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, Fields, I don't think is really cutting it right now in terms of being a starting quarterback in the NFL.
No.
The Patriots, um, what I'm saying is, I guess there a lot we will be able to tell a lot about really the teeth of this team when I
Sure.
see them play Baltimore. I think that's going to be a huge game for them in terms of this is the type of talent now we're going to see in the playoffs, right? We're turning that page. We've kind of reached our first goal, right? Now we want to be competitive with these teams, and again. It's an incredibly successful season thus far to be, sitting atop best record in the AFC. But Baltimore's got some good players. I know Jacksonville's kind of in the mix too. They'll always be competitive. The Colts, we'll see. And I know we want to transition talking about the Chiefs Colts matchup this Sunday. But I mean, yeah, Chiefs at 5-5, one of the biggest surprises of this year, obviously. I Chiefs kind of up and down. I thought they had figured it out. They dropped, two out of their first three games, and then they kind of strung a couple wins together. But at 5-5, it's getting tight. Now that doesn't say I won't bet against Pat Mahomes. I have a hard time betting against him. He's Pat Mahomes, and I think when push comes to shove, he'll go out there and get the job done. But what are your thoughts on this huge matchup against Indianapolis on Sunday for them?
Yeah, I frankly don't see a scenario where the Chiefs lose this game, in my opinion. I think
Yeah.
that yes, the Colts have been excellent all year long, but I think that it's the Chiefs with their backs against the wall in Arrowhead. I'm still trusting Pat Mahomes in this situation. I'm not trusting Daniel Jones in that situation. And again, like people have kind of crapped on the Patriots saying that they have a light schedule. The Colts, in my opinion, haven't had anything that's tougher. And, when they faced stiffer competition, they've either barely won by the skin of their teeth or they've lost those games. So I think that I would say, frankly, I don't see a world where the Chiefs lose this game. I know that they've had their struggles, but I think they take care of business here.
Yeah, I gotta tend to agree with you. This is a year I feel like where the NFC is stronger than the AFC. When you look at the Rams division with the 49ers and the Seahawks kind of all around the same level, Philadelphia is probably in the top category of teams in the league, even though I know they've had their moments this year with the offense, and AJ Brown is complaining about his playing time and getting the ball and the offense's efficiency. But overall, I think the NFC has more of a stronger conference, but the AFC is wide open, right? So can the Patriots be this effective down the stretch? Can they consistently be this effective? Now I know, like you mentioned, Milton Williams earlier having his injury, um, but Drake May's efficiency is great. And what do you think about this division clash? I mean, do you think that the NFC is stronger than the AFC this year?
Well, I think that the top players in the NFC are superior. I think that when you look at, I don't even think Philadelphia is as good as they have been in previous years, but I think that they're probably a more legit contender than most teams, I would say, out of the AFC. And same thing with a team maybe more like the Packers or the Rams for that matter. I think in the Lions as well. So I think those teams maybe I think have those might be a fiercer competition. I think that the AFC, the matchups might be a little bit closer, but I do think there is a good talent gap in the NFC. But I think the AFC still brings some good talent in its own right. And I think that, even though it's a down year, I think that, an AFC team could still come out of this conference and win a Super Bowl. I don't think it's like going to be like last year where, the NFC was just more dominant and you saw Philadelphia run away with that game. I don't think it's necessarily going to be like that, but yeah, I'm not necessarily too sure. But when you look
Yeah.
at this team with this Patriots, and obviously they've exceeded maybe the expectations of many to start this year. I'm interested in your thoughts. What do you think that, now that they are at least in the position to make the playoffs, let's say that they do, let's say maybe even, the one seed is in play. What needs to happen, in your opinion, for this to be considered a successful season?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think Drake's probably, gotta make that step in terms of, driving the offense down the field and winning a game for you, right? Can he get to the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes level of putting the team on his back and going and getting you that key touchdown in a game when, you need it most, right? You're down by a couple points and you need that key score. That is the next step for Drake, I feel like. The receiving core and the line have got to stay healthy. And I think the run game you brought up earlier, that can also be improved. Henderson's kind of had a nice surge lately, right? Can we see now more consistency from him? Ramondre and his struggles fumbling. Can we see more consistency from him there? It's those, I noticed too that sometimes we have some run plays that we are getting dropped for losses, right? Can we turn those maybe drop for loss plays into, couple yard gains? That is the type of, efficiency on offense I think we need to have, and that's the type of growth we need to see from some of our offensive players. And the defensive side of the ball, like I said, I feel as though it's been strong. I feel like we've gotten good play from Caleb on Chason on the edge. He's been solid. I think the linebackers, talk about Spillane has been very solid this year. Robert Spillane, captain in there. Even guys like Christian Ellis, who I know he's had a couple weeks on injury, but he was, all over the place when he was playing. I like Harold Landry on the edge, but can these guys, and make big plays too? Create turnovers is going to be huge down the stretch. And then, as far as Vrabel and the coaching staff, I think clock management in the NFL, I feel like has gone under the radar in recent years. I feel like a lot of coaches aren't technically coaching games as well as they were when you saw in the Brady, Manning, Roethlisberger, Breeze era. Um, and Ken Vrabel coach us to that big win too, right? So it's taken that next step, Brian, I think, in terms of that success level, in terms of getting us to the playoffs and then even further.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, success will be defined as them winning a playoff game. And I'm not saying,
Absolutely.
because for me it's not making the Super Bowl, it's not, trying to, it's not just making an AFC title game. For me it's winning a playoff game, not making one, winning one. Because
Right.
Carter, the last time the Patriots won a playoff game was Super Bowl 53, which was 7 years ago. So
It's been a while.
by the time we get to the Super Bowl, so it would be 7 years ago by the time we've gotten to this point. So yeah, they need to, yeah, it's going to need to happen. So yeah, I think that, yeah, like I think that's the bar you have to at least set for this team is winning a playoff game and seeing how Drake May looks in those playoffs. Because at the end of the day,
Right.
the question is going to be who is Drake May in the playoffs. He's been great right now. Might be the odds-on favorite to win the MVP. But is he going to be Patrick Mahomes or is he going to be Joe Burrow in the playoffs? Is he going to be like one of those guys when you get there, you can trust him that he's going to get the job done? Or is he going to be more like Justin Herbert? Is it going to be more like maybe Aaron Rodgers, who, had, one Super Bowl run in 2010, but otherwise fell short in a number of seasons? What is Drake May going to look like when it's a, winner take all game? And if you lose, you're going home. Like, what
Right.
does that look like?
Right.
Drake May, like, his first year, like they knew they weren't making the playoffs. They knew that wasn't even in the cards. So there's no pressure there. This season, there's actual stakes at play. When that comes down the pike, how is he going to adjust to that? We saw Mac Jones in 2021 in that playoff game against the Bills, and let alone there were more problems in that game than just Mac Jones. But Drake May is going to have to make plays and win you a football game. Like that's going to be what it comes down to in January and February. And I'd like to lean on the side that I think he does have that ability. I think that, when you listen to him in these press conferences and how he, handles himself, he seems to be, very even keel. It does not, doesn't fluctuate in emotion as much as you would see kind of Mac Jones during those press conferences where he was almost kind of on the verge of tears, half the time. And you kind of looked at him and you were like, oh, this guy is going to turn into a puddle. He just doesn't have, that whatever that grit or that ability to take over a game unless a team is like absolutely stacked around him. And when you look at Drake May, he's kind of the type that he might want to actually go into that kind of a fight. And it's not that he just kind of seems like he just is able to handle that pressure. And I think that will bode well in the playoffs. Now I could be totally wrong. He could go out there, throw 4 interceptions, throw for 122 yards and completely stink up the joint. But I lean more on the side that he's going to be okay in those types of situations. Maybe not great and maybe not the best in the league, but I think that he can handle himself enough to win you a game.
I would tend to agree with you. And I think our road record speaks for itself, right? We've had some really, really good wins on the road here. But like you said, can he take that? Can he take that next step? Can he handle that pressure in the playoffs and eventually win you that playoff game? That is going to be the question.
Yeah, and I think that, when you look at the league, like you've said, it's a down year for the league. Patrick
Right.
Mahomes and the Chiefs are 5-5 on the year. If they lose this next game, I think you had mentioned it before the show, there's a 38% chance that they make the playoffs, which means that, it's most likely going to be the case that they're on the outside looking in come January, which would be shocking for the league. And, the Buffalo Bills might be, in play for a wild card while you're sitting at home with the number 1 seed. So it has been almost a Twilight Zone episode this year, watching watching how this is all unfolded. And I think that, is Drake May going to be like, the top person that you're taking, in the NFL playoffs? And I'd be like, no, Patrick Mahomes is there. I'm probably taking him. I might even still take Josh Allen just based on the fact that he has that experience. And if the Pats and Bills are playing each other, Josh Allen has been there before. And I know that, you took care of business against them on Sunday Night Football in their stadium. I still think if the Bills are playing the Pats, I still might take Buffalo in that game, just knowing what, Josh Allen is able to do when, maybe he feels threatened and the game is on the line. I think he can still take over a game, maybe in a way that Drake May can. And I've been very enthused with what Drake has been able to bring to the table. I think that, he can make some of those little plays there too and have kind of his star moments. We saw it against the Jets where he was, rolling out to his right and he kind of had that little dump off pass to Stephon Diggs that turned into, I think, like a 18-yard gain or something like that. So he can have kind of like playoff magic like that too. I think that is definitely in the cards for him, but I think that, the experience of that, I think you still have to give to someone like a Josh Allen. So
Right.
that's kind of where I lean there, but I am excited to see what the future can hold for him in New England. Whereas with Mac Jones, after that, 2021 game, yeah, like you tried to still have that belief in him and saying that he could get it done, but I think you knew that, the physical traits weren't going to be there. And, you kind of wanted to get a guy that, really can, take over the game like that instead of just, a cerebral, like, game manager type.
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to give a shout out to Mac Jones a little bit though, coming in kind of steadying the ship for the Niners this year, and we could
Yeah.
we could sit here and talk, till we're blue in the face about why it didn't work with Mac in New England, was it him, was it coaching, etc. But I think with Mac, he had the system in San Francisco, and it seemed to be somewhat of a success for him.
Yeah, and I think that when he's had coaching and good coaching around him, he's been successful. You look at what it's been like in 2021, that season he was a Pro Bowler. And yeah, like
Right.
he was excellent through those first maybe 11 weeks in the season. People don't want to talk about that in the back half of the season. His stats kind of declined a little bit, and you could kind of see that downward trajectory maybe based on the fact that teams kind of got film on him and maybe had a better idea of what he can and can't do. But I think that, yeah, with good coaching, he can be a successful quarterback. And, I think that, again, lends itself to just how valuable Josh McDaniels has been since he's come back to the Patriots. And, say what you want to say about him as a head coach. And it's really not good. Like his track record hasn't been that great, but, you know, you can say that obviously Tom Brady is Tom Brady. He's going to do his own thing, but they were successful when they were together. But then he was able to adapt as well during the Matt Castle year. He was able to adapt when Cam Newton was here in 2020, and then get Mac Jones up to speed and get him to be a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. And now you're seeing him do it with Drake May, turning him into potentially the future league MVP. And I think it's safe to say that Josh McDaniels has established himself as probably one of the best offensive coordinators of our generation and is making it,
Absolutely.
you know, again, as a coach, I wouldn't say that, he's much to write home about, but he's put together a, offensive coordinator kind of resume that, could get him in Canton, I would say one day with how good he's been in that role. I'm not one to kind of, glaze offensive coordinators and try to, pump up people like that. But I think that he has been, that good with getting these guys up to speed. And it surprised me when that was the hire, I was kind of unenthused. I was like, all right, yeah, you're just, playing the same record over again. You're just going back to what you know. And that was one of the things that annoyed me with the Patriots and annoyed me with this Mike Vrabel move. I kind of wanted them to maybe explore something that they weren't as familiar with, go get a coach that wasn't as, that maybe hadn't been established in New England before and they didn't really know that well and actually go through an interview process. But, I'll admit that I'm wrong. He was the right hire, whether it was forced or not. He came in here and he's been, great for this team.
Absolutely. His ability to put Drake in the best positions possible has really, really, helped him develop and contributed to the success of the Patriots this year. That's a great point. I mean, if you look at Bill O'Brien when he was the offensive coordinator for Mac, and you look at, what Josh McDaniels was able to do for not only Mac but right now for Drake and kind of turning him into the MVP candidate that he is it's insane, Brian. And I totally agree that could probably it should get him a spot in Canton at some point.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just saying, I don't know what
Right,
offensive coordinators, Canton, if that's even something that even happens for coordinators, but he's had that
right.
kind of a run where it's like, okay, there's a proven track record of success here, and again, I think if he was to ever get to be an MVP caliber quarterback, and maybe even was to ever win a Super Bowl with coordinating him, that would be something incredible for his resume of saying that he's bridged the gap between two dynasties for the Patriots of saying like, all right, yeah, he was able to get Brady over it and that in that second part of the dynasty, and then he goes away for a little bit, goes to Vegas, but he's back now, and he gets the next guy, he coaches him up, and he gets them to win that next championship. That would be like the ultimate like success story for Josh McDaniels. And for him, like I know that he probably wants to be a head coach in the league, and maybe a team would be willing to give him a shot if they felt that he could turn it around. But at this point, why would you? Like he is doing such a good job here. He's made his own legacy. Like he has been absolutely incredible for them.
Yeah, can't disagree. Can't
Yeah.
disagree.
But yeah, so Carter, that's kind of my take on some of the NFL stuff. I don't know where else you kind of stood on that, but before we actually transition, I do just want to say, as we head into this weekend with the Patriots playing the Cincinnati Bengals, it's looking like Joe Burrow is trending towards playing. Obviously we went into this one, expecting Burrow and now Jamar Chase to be out of this game. Chase will be out serving suspension for spitting on Jalen Ramsey. of course, which, it seemed like with that luck, it was like, all right, everything's just, going in the Patriots' favor here. You'll be playing Joe Flacco with T. Higgins as the number one receiver. But, there is a chance now that Burrow's going to be back. For you going into this game, how much does that change your opinion on the Pats and how they'll fare in this one?
It's gonna be interesting. Like I talked about earlier in the show, I think Rodgers at times when he was playing another AFC North quarterback this year had his way with the secondary, right? Can this secondary with some young players? I'll mention Craig Woodson, who's done a nice job at safety this year, and then with the veteran presence of Jalen Hawkins back there, guys like Christian Gonzalez, who's a lockdown corner, Pro Bowl candidate this year, Carlton Davis. I think our slot receiver there has been fantastic. Marcus Jones, I know he's battled some injuries, but can they, Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow, right? And can they effectively, mitigate what he's going to be able to do out there? The Christian Gonzalez T. Higgins matchup will be fascinating. I don't know if they're going to give him different looks, but I mean, yeah, Cincinnati's still Cincinnati. Whether Jamar Chase is out there or not, they still got some guys. You talk about Gesicki, you talk about Yoshivas. Chase Brown looked like a really good, he had a really good start to his career last year, and hasn't seemed to have that same production. The run game hasn't really been there for them, but yeah, no, it'll definitely be interesting now that Joe Burrow's trending on playing, and he'll be effective because he's Joe Burrow, and the pitcher's got to be ready.
Yeah, I think if Burrow does play it, obviously makes this a challenge tougher, but I still think that, regardless, the Bengals are going to put up points in this game. That
Absolutely.
they've been doing it with Flacco regardless, and they've had some, close losses mixed in there and some tough games with that, but they still have a, very dynamic offense, and they're going to be successful in this game. I don't think the Patriots are going to be able to shut them down completely. So, it's going to be kind of a, kind of a offensive, just barn burner. I think that's going to be, back and forth in that kind of a way. And, I think that the Patriots have the ability to pull this one out, but I think that, maybe the thing that you're banking on is that Joe Burrow's a little bit rusty coming off this injury, and that there's a little bit of a factor of that plays in. So, maybe that could be something that you look at. So we'll, have to see how it all plays out this Sunday at 1 p.m. So interesting to see how how that'll all go. But Carter, we're going to transition real quick. We're actually going to talk about the MLB. You talked about the MLB playoffs and kind of what the future of Major League Baseball is going to look like, with some, changes happening this offseason and, potential changes moving forward. Carter, I know that, we were talking before the show. You were really, enthusiastic talking about the MLB playoffs and just how great of a format and, just the overall result this year. Just talk about, your reactions to the playoffs. I know we're, over a month or so removed from it, but just give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I thought the product the MLB put out this year was phenomenal. A lot of series went deep. Um, Pitching was great. It was just really fun to watch. There was a lot of likable teams, and I think, I mean, obviously with the Sox going down, amazing series. But past that, I mean, besides the Sox, I gotta be like I was basically became a Toronto Blue Jays fan, an honorary Toronto Blue Jays fan. The players that they put out, I mean, Vlad was so locked in, so fun to watch. Players like Ernie Clement, Dalton Varsho in center, Alejandro Kirk, to name a few. All those guys really kind of made the playoffs so fun, and the World Series, making it sort of this David versus Goliath matchup, even though Toronto had the best record, I think, in all of baseball last year. It was really, really special to watch that team come into their own. I wasn't a big George Springer fan, at the beginning of the year with the 2017 sign stealing gate, but he was fun to watch in the playoffs as well. I mean, you talk about series. I mean, I thought the Cincinnati Reds, that was fun to watch the Mets collapse there at the end and kind of the Cincinnati Reds sneak in. Chicago had a fantastic series taking down those San Diego Padres in the wild card round. Always love to see Machado lose. Dansby Swanson was amazing at shortstop. They've got a lot of young stars and a bright future. You talk about the Milwaukee Brewers taking care of business in Game Five. Chicago being down 2-0, going back to Chicago. You thought that was going to be a sweep, maybe. No, goes to 5 games. Milwaukee survives by the skin of their teeth and advances, and is really no match for the Dodgers, which I saw that coming. And then I got to also mention the Seattle Mariners and the product of the team that they put out this year. Phenomenal lineup. I like the trades they made to get Naylor and Eugenio Suarez at the end of the year. Really kind of boosted their lineup. I know that was Suarez's second go around with the Mariners. Really, really fun to watch. Cal Raleigh in the season he had, and that series went seven. Incredible, incredible. But I think the elephant in the room. I also got to bring up the Phillies too and their struggles in the playoffs, which seems like a annual thing now for the Philadelphia Phillies and Bryce Harper and Castellanos, Trey Turner, their ability, that core group that they've had with JT Realmuto, not to get to the next level and get that championship ring. But I got to say, we got to address the elephant in the room, Brian. I think the Dodgers won the World Series by the skin of their teeth. Kiner Falefa was literally inches from scoring that winning run in the extra innings in Game 7. But it seems like it's time for there to be a salary cap in baseball.
Carter, that has been something that's been talked about for a while with in Major League Baseball. And, I saw an article, I think it was from The Athletic. It was based around the 20 it was based around the NLCS this year with the Brewers and the Dodgers, and you talk about two organizations that are very different from one another. The Brewers are kind of almost the modern day equivalent of a Moneyball franchise, where they're not even really playing off analytics. It's almost weird, like they. Salary wise, it reminds you of Moneyball, but they're playing more traditional baseball. Like they're focused on getting guys on base. They're not trying to hit. They're not just trying to hit a home run every at bat. Like they're playing actual baseball, like the way the game was played maybe 20 years ago. And for me, it was kind of refreshing to see. It was nice to see, guys at the plate trying to, battle for walks and working the count and actually, bunting and trying to like do different things to, win the game in those kind of ways. And it was interesting as opposed to the modern strategy of just step back in the box and just try to crank it and hit the ball as far as you can. And that's kind of just what the game's become. And, you just have to accept it for what it is. But I did like what the Brewers brought to the table, but unfortunately, their bats just went ice cold against the Dodgers for whatever reason. And yeah, I think that, the Dodgers are definitely a powerhouse in Major League Baseball. They're, going on a run and have been, more dominant than any team that we've seen, maybe since the turn of the century with the Yankees, winning their titles, back in the late 90s and them being now the first team to repeat since the Yankees, of that day. So yeah, I think that, listen, I'm actually not a fan of the salary cap in baseball. I think that, listen, I think that if you do it, in my opinion, like I have a list of the MLB salaries listed, and it kind of lists the following, and it says the Dodgers total payroll is 240 million, the Mets is 212 million, the Toronto Blue Jays, who were just in this World Series, have a payroll of 193 million, and yes, there is a difference there of close to 50 million. But the Toronto Blue Jays aren't some, scavengers, at the bottom of barrel of the league just trying to get by. They're a spender in this league, and they actually spend more than, the Boston Red Sox, who ranked 11th in Major League Baseball, only spending 137 million this year. Which again,
Right.
I say only because again, that's more money than I
Right.
could ever really even fathom. But still, like you look at a team like that and you're like, interesting, to where it's like,
Right.
okay, like
Right.
you would think that would be handled a little bit differently. And yes, the Dodgers are basically saying, luxury tax be damned, everything like that. And I can understand people saying like, oh, you got to stop the Dodgers, you got to, break up this team. And I think that, yeah, I understand the idea behind it. But in my opinion, it's going to do, two things. One, the Dodgers are so rich, and they've also, from what I've heard, they've basically paid off the money that Shohei's contract was, like that money that they paid for him, with the amount of marketing that they've gotten from overseas and marketing in Japan. That they've already matched their earnings from that contract. That's already paid itself back to them, which is unbelievable to see. And then the other thing I think it's going to do is that, the teams that want to spend are going to spend. If there's a salary cap, if you go over it, I think you still just pay a luxury tax, and that's just how that goes. If you put in a cap, it's just going to force teams to basically just say like, oh yeah, sorry guys, we can't spend, we're getting too close to the cap. If we go over the cap, things are going to, affect us. In a different sports setting, you look at the Boston Celtics, who, in my opinion, use the cap as an excuse. And yes,
Right.
a guy like Jason Tatum goes down and, you can make excuses there. But I think that the cap becomes an excuse in my opinion. And it's just like these owners are just saying like, we don't want to spend the money, and it's just kind of another reason for them to get away with it. And listen, if they want to just like tell the fans straight up, we don't want to spend this money. Yeah, it sucks, but there's something a little bit less, disingenuous about it. Like you're at least owning the fact that you don't want to spend money. And at that point, the fans can, either choose to protest you and say like, listen, sell the team. If you don't want to be in this business and pony up the money, then get out. But yeah, I think that, listen, I don't think it's going to make as much of a difference as people are willing to say. I think that, teams that don't want to spend aren't going to spend. I think that at the end of the day, like even implementing, a salary floor, which people have said too, of saying like, some of these, lower spending teams at least need to spend a certain threshold and meet stuff, like, for example, you mentioned I talked about the Los Angeles Dodgers who, spent 240 million on last year's payroll. The Washington Nationals are 30th in the league. They spend 47 million, not 147, $47 million in payroll. So yes, there's a drastic difference there. And I think that, you at least need to bring up that floor and have them spending money. But the problem that you're going to run into is that the teams are just going to say, okay, you're going to make us spend this much. They're just like, all right, we'll just increase everyone's money enough to just basically meet the salary floor. So it's a really damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I understand where people want to do it, but I don't think it's going to be the, saving grace, end all be all that people think it'll be.
No, that's a good point. And I think what made the playoffs for me so fun this year was close ball games,
Yeah.
players who you didn't think, you maybe even didn't even know their name before the playoffs came alive. And long series, right? You want to see those game sixes. You want to, as a fan, you want to see those game 6-7s, right? And teams that don't normally get into those types of situations were in. Let's talk about this. The Seattle Mariners making their first pennant since the year 2000. We talk about the Toronto Blue Jays almost getting their first World Series as the early 90s. You want to see teams mixed up as a fan in terms of getting into the
Yeah.
playoffs.
Yeah, no,
And
I
that's
think you definitely want to see parity. I think that is something that is nice, and Major League Baseball has struggled with that. But I think that, yeah, like, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. But yeah, like I do agree. You do want to see some parity with these teams.
Absolutely. I mean, as far as like Boston spending goes, that's a whole different story. We can go on for about that and why the ownership continues not to spend probably where their salary cap should be in terms of, what they should be spending in free agency and who they should be looking at. But like I said, from an overall viewpoint and in terms of making the playoffs like so fun to watch, I think pitch clock has really helped the game too, in terms of speeding it up. And you mentioned those situations where players are in situations to drop down bunts. That makes the game fun. It makes you as a fan of the game think about what's going to happen. And makes the commentators explain so that you're really locked in and listening to the game, and that's a huge part of it as well, rather than just going up there and swinging for the fences every time. And I just look at the construction of the Blue Jays roster, right? Guys I didn't mention were Addison Barger, Andres Jimenez. And um, they offered Vladdy that big contract, and it was kind of like there were whispers of Vladdy going to the Sox, going elsewhere, entering free agency, and they gave him that money, which was huge. And then going out and signing a guy like Andres Jimenez, who was great defensively, maybe not the best offensive player, but then you see those kind of players come alive when you need them to. I think Andres Jimenez had a couple really really big hits for this team, and Addison Barger, who was sleeping on the couch of a teammates, and he's like having the games of his life and throughout this run. And Ernie Clement was certainly a star, but fans like the underdog type of player getting that opportunity. I look at Nathan Lucas too, spending 10 years in the minors. I was all over the Toronto Blue Jays, man,
Yeah,
and it
I was
made
about
it
to say you
fun.
you sound like you were pretty locked in.
I was, and the Mariners too. They're and I give them a lot of credit. I was kind of independent, didn't know who to kind of root for at times, as I liked their roster too. And I was just like, I honestly expected the Yankees to handle business against the Blue Jays, and for me, it was so exciting that Vladdy did what he did in that series, and Ernie Clement with how high he batted in terms of average, and the amount of hits he got in the postseason. He has like the most hits for any single postseason run. credit their organization for really making it fun this year. And like I said, the Brewers you talked about, I love their. I couldn't name any players on the Brewers besides Contreras and Christian Yelich, and they made the pennant. So it was fun to watch. Um, Dansby Swanson starred at short, but like you said, does salary cap really help? I'm not sure because, like you said, the teams like the Dodgers are just going to pay that luxury tax anyway because they're so rich.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the thing that you mentioned, about the Blue Jays, and listen, they had a great year, and it was a fun team to watch, especially get hot and go on a run this postseason. But as a Red Sox fan, I will say this: when we played them in the regular season, did you feel like they were like the Red Sox were that far off from the Blue Jays in your opinion? Like I
Absolutely, yeah.
in my opinion, no. In my opinion,
No,
it's not the case. And I would say this: I think that the difference that got the Blue Jays over the hump was their willingness to spend, and not spend stupidly, but they did invest in their star player in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They gave him like the contract that he wanted, and they were able to lock him down long term, which got him invested in this team. But even at the trade deadline, they went out and they got Shane Bieber. They went out and they brought in guys this offseason like a Max Scherzer who maybe people didn't believe in at the start of this year, but they said they said what, we'll take a chance on a guy like this, see what he's got left. He provided them with some key innings late down the stretch in this one, and they were willing to go out there and not spend stupidly, but be willing to make additions to this team. When you look at the Boston Red Sox, their biggest addition of the year was sending Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants, and that was your big move, and it was just, and you got back nothing for him. You got
right.
back absolutely nothing. And I think that needs to be, that can't be understated based on the fact that, all right, yeah, you're going to trade away a guy like Rafael Devers. And they're like, all right, well, now we're going to, replace him in the lineup and we're going to get something back. And I'm like, you're full of crap. You're not going to do that. You're going to
Right.
just, you're just going to pocket the money. And people are now saying, well, now you have all this Devers money to spend in free agency. I don't believe that for a second. I mean, listen, maybe they'll go and get Pete Alonso on a cheap contract. Maybe they'll try to, get Alex Bregman back here if they can sway him back to Boston. But I don't think they're going to be these big time spenders in the offseason the way people envision it. I'd love them to do that. I'd love them to go out and, actually reshape this roster and, get back in the top 10 of payroll, which I don't think is, which shouldn't be, the Red Sox should always, at least in my opinion, be in the top 5, at least the top 10. It's kind of ridiculous how far they've fallen, in my opinion. But yeah, like I think that, they're not far off from this kind of a team, which I think makes it more frustrating based on the fact that, all right, yeah, the Red Sox got hot in the second half. And I'm not saying that, maybe even if you had Rafael Devers on this team, it's maybe the culture isn't there and it's not as successful. But I think that, you weren't willing to invest in this group. You didn't believe in them. And, you ended up falling out of the playoffs as a result of it. And I think that, I think the Blue Jays, yeah, they had a fun run. It was a good team. If you told me next year that they were in third place in the AL East and missed the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised. That's just how I think that the AL is going right now.
That's a good point. The Red Sox did not seem far off. In fact, I think they won the series against the Blue Jays maybe like
Yeah,
two series before the playoffs started.
yeah,
They took care of business, and it was kind of like, okay, Boston, they kind of look like they're, heading in the right direction here. Um, yeah, the Sox, like you mentioned, disappointing in the trade deadline, I thought. You get Dustin May, who really did, you get a forced starter in there who didn't really, turn out to
do
be
anything. No, he was horrible for
right.
them.
And they had a chance to get Joe Ryan from the Twins, and I think they missed on that. That was also a huge miss for them. To have that number 2 starter in a 3-game series in the wild card where, Giolito goes down, that's unfortunate. But to have Joe Ryan there, you probably win that series. And that
Sure,
is the type of decision that the Red Sox should have made, right? Let's go all in. Let's believe in this young core here. Let's believe in, Bregman and leading this young group of players to get this done. But in terms of what the Red Sox need to do is, like you said, they need to get back in the spending pool, right? I heard whispers of Kyle Schwarber. They got to go get a bat. They got to go get a Pete Alonso in the middle of that lineup, and they got to go get a Joe Ryan. They've got to sign these guys this year. I mean, you have Crochet on top of the rotation. Let's get a nice number 2 right with him. I don't know what Giolito's going to do. Try your best to get Bregman back. back at Boston. Brian, I really don't understand why Bregman wouldn't want to stay in Boston at this point in his career with all the young talent we have and the ability to like lead these guys. Do you
Yeah,
want to
I
talk to
mean,
that?
yeah, I mean, I think that
Yeah,
I think he wants to stay in Boston, but I think that he wants to be paid, accordingly. I think that,
right.
the Red Sox gave him the option of, $40 million a year with an opt out after each year of the contract. In my opinion, I knew he was going to take it the second he had, somewhat of a successful season. In my opinion, the only way he was going to come back for the second year of that contract was if he got, hurt and was sidelined for a significant portion of the season, more than he already was. I mean, he missed a probably a good chunk of the season, with that lower body injury, but it ultimately didn't end up mattering. He was still a integral enough piece that he ended up saying like, all right, he proved what he was worth, and he's like, all right, now I can go test myself on the open market again. So. Yeah, I think that he'd be interested in coming back to Boston. I think that he probably likes it in Boston, but if they're not willing to pony up and pay him what him and what Scott Boras thinks that he's worth, they're not going to be taking some hometown discount. Scott Boras is going to nickel and dime you for everything that you have, and is going to get the best deal for his client. That's just how he goes. You're not going to win that negotiation battle with him. That's not going to happen. So yeah, I think that maybe he'd like to be in Boston, but I don't think that it's all that likely if unless the Red Sox are willing to come to the table.
Right. And that's how they're going to get the roster they need to win a World Series with the farm system there, the Roman Anthony's, the Marcelo Myers, Cedar Rafaelas. They're going to need to go get free agent big time players to complement those young players.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to have to do that. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how they'll do this offseason. It's going to be definitely very interesting. But, that's kind of my take on the MLB where they're kind of at right now. I know I saw recently that they just did a recent media rights deal with NBC is going to be doing Sunday Night Baseball now. They're going to have some MLB games on Netflix. So, I've heard some people back and forth on it. I think it's an interesting opportunity. So we'll have to see how that all goes. But that's kind of my thoughts on baseball. Carter, I figured before we go, we're both Bryant University alums.
Go
It's
Dogs.
yeah, go Dogs, especially. It's an exciting time right now at Bryant. There's, some great action going on, across the sports world there. Um, mainly right now, the main story going on campus is the Bryant men's soccer team who earned the school's first at-large bid in program history. They're going to be the number 11 seed in the tournament. They're going to face off against the winner of Seton Hall and Siena. Carter, I have the game up right now of Seton Hall and Siena. They're playing right now as we're recording this
I was gonna
podcast.
say,
It's currently tied 1-1. Seton Hall was leading for the majority of the game, and I think that in what I think was almost the 89th minute, Siena managed to tie this one up, and it was incredible because it looked like it was going to be Seton Hall for the most part, but it's a tight game yet again. But it'll be the winner of those two at Burns Stadium on Sunday. This upcoming weekend. So I'm excited to see how that's going to go. In your opinion, just, we got to see, Bryant men's soccer over the course of the past 3 years completely reshape their identity. When I, came to Bryant at first, like, no offense to men's soccer, it just wasn't, thought about. I'm like, that's kind of the best way to put it. It just was like, all right, like, yeah, that's, you have men's soccer. It's just your varsity sport. Like, they'll probably have like an okay season, if they, have a winning record at the end of the year, like, cool. Like maybe you win a playoff game or something in the playoffs if you make it, but if not, really, it's kind of no sweat. But that really all changed when, Coach Ruben Resendiz, came in from Franklin Pierce. He brought them a national championship at the D2 level, and he's reshaped what, soccer can look like in the Northeast and especially at Bryant University. He had them ranked as high as number 2 in the nation this year. And I'm not in like Carter. Listen, I'm not even a soccer guy. I'm really not. I've grew up in a soccer town. Like I played it growing up, and frankly, I couldn't stand the sport when I grew up playing it because I was just like, I just frankly wasn't any good. And when I played against and when I had other people in the town that played it, I was just like, and they were obviously probably better. I was just like, all right, yeah, like I don't understand what's happening. I'd rather just go play baseball. That was always my mentality with it. But frankly, Bryant men's soccer is so entertaining. It's actually brought me kind of back into the sport, and it's very fun to watch because, Coach Ruben has brought in talent from, across the world, and they're recruiting in a way that, it's almost very similar to the way college hockey is recruited, where you almost have juniors and you're having, guys that are playing almost at a semi-professional level. You bring them in as 21-year-old, freshmen or sophomores, and, they're able to, come in with a lot more experience. I think that, you probably have guys on this soccer team that are, closer to my age, like 24, maybe with a couple of years of eligibility left. So it's crazy to see, like, that's the way that college soccer has gone. And in my opinion, it's very smart because, when you look around the world of, college sports, say in basketball, you're always going to know that maybe the Big East or the ACC or even the SEC in basketball are going to have, some of the powerhouse teams that you'll see, in March Madness in those playoffs. And then in college football, of course, you'll know that the SEC, the Big 12, the Big 10 are going to produce those, high caliber talent and, have those teams most likely to make the college football playoff. College soccer is a little bit different. There are some teams in there that you'll see ranked in the top spots that, make sense. Like Stanford's a good school, for men's soccer. They've been ranked number one for a majority of the season. But then other than that, it's schools like, not San Diego State, like the University of San Diego is like a top 10 soccer team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
The University of Vermont, who has been,
Yep.
has been very consistent, prior to winning the national championship last year. They've, been in the top 10. They've been, always, a top contributing team. They go on a run last year. They win the title as, like, I think the 11th seed in the tournament, which is what Bryant is right now. So it's like, there's a ton of parity in college soccer. And, Coach Rubin is, pounced on that, basically saying, like, all right, I'm going to get my guys in here. I know how to coach a program. And he's, completely reshaped it. I mean, Carter, just from your perspective of, being at Bryant during this time, just, you've seen it too. Just give me your thoughts on this.
It's fantastic. I think you really hit everything there. Ruben has changed our program, completely flipped it, and done it beautifully. You mentioned the international players coming in, getting them from those players from those leagues, and like you said, with eligibility rules in the NCAA now, it's you can kind of play into your mid-20s, and it's kind of like a new normal. But it's huge, man. It's great for the school. It's great for the community. And there's a couple homegrown guys there too. I mean, you got guys like Abdel Talabi, who I know have been there since we were young at Bryant. And to bring in, player they had the midfielder player of the year there, Paco Fernandez, really anchoring that midfield coming over from Spain. It's really fun to watch. I'm a big soccer fan. I played soccer my whole life. And what Ruben's been able to do for the school, the athletics department at Bryant, has been absolutely huge. And then they continue to break, records every year now. Back in 2023, when we had our NCAA tournament game against Yale, in which we were there. That was a tough one. 1-0 loss to Yale with the half court chip. With 40 seconds left in the game, heartbreaker. That season it was like, okay, Bryant soccer's on the map. That's the first time in school history we've been ranked, right? And then, we kind of 2 years later, now it's top 10, then it's number 2. It seems like it's a stepping stone every year and Ruben coming in with that tremendous resume. He was actually at Dean before Franklin Pierce, had some great teams at Dean, and he ends up winning a D2 national championship with Franklin Pierce, was an assistant at University of New Hampshire. Really, really has strengthened our program and made this a marquee program. It's been really, really fun to watch. Just us go and dominate teams and be able to, kind of show the America East, done a lot for that conference in terms of our power, in terms of soccer conferences. You talk about Vermont being the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament this year from the Northeast, and from the America East, the defending national champions as well. Really, really giving the America East a big shout, strengthening our conference and Bryant's programs.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, just like when you look at, Bryant's programs, when, I grew up, I actually went to, some Bryant camps back in the day. I used to go to, the Bryant baseball camps. And, from what Bryant was really just kind of known as a baseball and in some circles, a men's lacrosse school, kind of growing up. That was kind of,
Right.
what Bryant was thought of because, on the men's lacrosse side, you had Coach Pressler come over from Duke University and, really took that program up and really built them into what the powerhouse they are now with Coach Brad Ross there. And they've been great. And then on the baseball side, they, had always been consistent since going D1. They were, always in the hunt or winning those NEC titles, going to the NCAA tournament. So, I always thought of it in that way. And then, the identity got changed in 2022 when basketball really started to take off and went to March Madness. And that was like, okay, I guess we're a basketball school now. And that kind of persona has persisted throughout these past 3 years. And, now you look at men's soccer who's on the rise. And it's, not that baseball or men's lacrosse or these other sports have taken a back seat and have, gone downhill. Those are still very competitive programs. But now it's become the fact that they're more well-rounded in, areas that you wouldn't have even thought possible years ago. I mean, I think that, it's very interesting to see. And, you've brought in great players, like you said, from Spain, like Paco Fernandez. You look at Jaime Amaro, who's also from Madrid. He's like led the America East in basically all offensive stats the entire year. It's a fun team to watch too. Like, I mean, and they're hungry for it. I mean, unfortunately, their 2 losses this year, both coming to Vermont, who are the defending national champs. So I think that all makes some sense there. But yeah, I think that they're going to be a fun group to watching this playoff. I think that I think that they definitely have a chance to make some noise and actually get this thing done. I think at this point now, I remember I talked to Coach Rubin when they ended up ultimately losing that Yale game. And, he was disappointed, obviously. But I think, the main kind of point that a lot of people said to him was like, you know what, hey, you just, it's the best season Bryant soccer's ever had in their history. You should be proud of this. You should all be this. But, he had the mentality of like, no, we can do more. And, for us, that was kind of just like shocking of just being like, listen, like, yeah, sure you can, but like, it was a great run. Like obviously. But he said, no, like, I'm disappointed. This team and this program can do more. And that was before Vermont went on and won the national championship and was like, okay, maybe, but like, what really do you think they can do? And then I think, a lot of fans up here, when Vermont went was in the same conference as us, went on and won that championship, it opened everyone's eyes and basically went like, oh, shoot, like, this is possible. This can happen. And, Coach Rubin has recruited his butt off. He has gotten great guys into this program, like Mohamed Adriana from UAlbany, who's been a great
Yep.
player for them this year. So, yeah, credit to him. It's been a great team, and I think that, that it's going to bode well for them this time around in the NCAA tournament. Can't wait to see what they're going to do. So that's kind of my take on, men's soccer. I think that it's going to be a ton of fun to see how that all goes. But Carter, before we go, also kind of sticking with some Bryant sports, let's talk a little bit about the Bryant basketball team this year. Obviously, 1-4 start to the season. They just played Virginia Tech on Wednesday night. They fell in that one, 78-61. They've played some very high caliber teams to start this year, and they're not stepping off the gas just yet. They're playing number 3 UConn this Sunday in Hartford. Are you going to the game, Carter? I know I am.
I am. Oh, yeah, I am going actually.
Yeah.
So we'll see you there, I guess.
Yeah, I was about to say I'll see you at the game, so it's gonna be a ton of
Yeah.
fun. I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be a great showing. So, yeah, I mean, like they're preparing for what a eventual America East run is gonna look like, and yeah, they're taking their lumps right now, and it's a brand new team essentially. You only have really 2 returning players that played considerable minutes last year, so it's a different look. And I'm excited to see what this team can do. I think that, they have a lot of athletic potential. It's going to just be a matter of whether they can put it together.
Yeah. Brian, I remember last year we didn't have a great out of conference record at all. And it
No.
was kind of like, I remembered on the Dog Talk, people were saying, yeah, geez, I don't know about this team this year. They don't look good. They lost some games that they maybe should have won. I remember we dropped a game to Stonehill, who's in the NEC.
Yep.
That was a
I,
tough
I was
loss.
I was at that game. That was
Yeah.
yeah, that was a tough loss, and it was also not just the fact that you lost. I mean, being in the crowd there at Stonehill, it was the way you lost, and it was
Right.
that Stonehill just outworked you in that game. And it was that, it was a 1 point loss, but you had guys like Connor Withers who got teched up and got thrown out of that game. And, unfortunately, it let some things get the best of him. And, there had been some questions as to whether he would be able to handle that stress, things like that. And I'll talk about that in a second. But, and then, you had you had some guys that were out of that lineup as well, but it really wasn't going to matter. That game just wasn't, they just didn't seem like they wanted it in that game. And then I think the one that I remember that really kind of, maybe not had me nervous because I knew that they were a good team, but I remember when I saw them, I was with the team when we went out to Arizona and they played Grand Canyon a couple of days after Christmas, actually and it was on December 30th. So right before New Year's Eve. And we played that game and they lost by 60 points. 6-0 they lost by. And I remember being on the sideline and there were some Bryant alumni people that were there that I knew and I was kind of mingling with and talking with. And they were just saying to me, like, what the hell is happening? Like, we haven't had like a blowout game like this in years. And I was saying, I know, like, I don't know what's happening. And it seemed like something that it just didn't stop. And I was like, oh boy, like, what is this going to mean for conference season? And I remember I talked with Coach Martelli following that game. And he just said, honestly, like, hey, like, we're going to have to, he ended up saying basically that, like, we're going to have to just, he was just like, listen, at non-conference is over. It's time for the regular season to start and we got to go for it. And, to his credit, he was able to, rally that team and get them to, be, performing at a high level. But yeah, I think it's, it's definitely a testament to what that group was able to accomplish in 2025 and get to that level. It was very impressive nonetheless. As we look ahead with them, they this season, again, like I had said, they have a ton of athletic potential. I think you look at someone like Quincy Allen, who is going viral right now on ESPN. He has that reverse, he had that lob windmill dunk. Unbelievable play. He's a very special kind of talent player, and the fact that you have him on this roster is impressive. And I think that Jamian Christian brings a refreshing style to this team, trying to have them, be very pass heavy, shoot some threes and do things like that. The question is going to just be the efficiency of it, because he wants them to shoot over 50% of their shots from three. But in their game against Valpo, they only shot 27% from the field. So if you're doing that, then that's not going to bode well for you. You need to be more efficient from that. I think they only made 6 of 29 3-pointers in that game against Valpo. So if you're doing that, then it's not working. And what I'm trying to figure out now is, I understand that it's like, hey, might as well just try to shoot as many as we can right now, figure it out. But when these games start mattering in January, what is the adjustment going to look like if the shots aren't falling? Is it just going to be just shoot until the game ends and, hope that, just something changes? Or is it going to be like, okay, you know what? These shots aren't falling right now. What's the adjustment we make? Like, how do we, get the ball? How do we get to the basket and, make plays a different way? Like, that's what I'm still trying to figure out about Coach Christian. And listen, Coach Christian's, he seems like a great guy. I've talked to him a couple times and, he seems like he's motivated with this group, but that's something I have wondered about.
Absolutely. I think my first thought is there's a lot of freshmen. There's a good amount of freshmen. Talking about guys like Ashley Sims. They bring a couple freshmen off the bench. Jamian Christensen, he was coaching in Europe. He brought a couple European players over, reuniting with Keegan Harvey from George Washington University, where Coach Jamian had a stint. Listen, it's very early, but I guess going back to the point about our non-conference bad schedule last year in terms of the results, I think I don't really trust non-conference for the level, the conference that we're in, right? I think what really, it's great to get this exposure against Virginia Tech, UConn, and play those types of teams and have those games and get NCAA tournament ready, March ready. But, it's going to come down to what we do in conference play, like you said. So Jamian, it's good for him to see these, watch this film now of these games. And, I'd rather, lose to Valpo like that now than have it happen and against New Hampshire or Albany in February, March, when it really, really matters. So, I give Jamie a lot of credit coming in building this roster. It seems deep. They go 10 deep sometimes, 11 even off the bench. And it's a younger team. Ty Tabaz is as a freshman as well. He's very fun to watch. You mentioned Quincy Allen. It's nothing but great exposure when he goes like viral like that, and they make Sports Center top
Yeah,
10. So
it's a ton of fun. And
right,
I think, like you said, they are deep. But my question is, what does the strategy of this team look like? You can play 10 guys and it can be great, but you know, what is like the identity of this team going to look like? It seems like, yeah, he wants to play everyone right now. And yeah, depth in the America East and in college basketball, that is a strength. But I think you also need to determine, like, all right, like who is going to be, some of your, definitive point scorers, who are going to make those,
right,
key plays for it, who is taking that last shot of the game. In my opinion, it is Quincy Allen, if all
right.
with all things considered. But it seems like, yeah, like they're trying to spread the ball around, make things happen. And I think that can work. But I think that right now it is a feeling out process. Like you saw a guy like Gio Sanford make his collegiate debut. Joe Green was getting some minutes where maybe you thought that he might redshirt the season and they might not play a guy like him. So it's interesting to see how it's all been playing out.
Absolutely. And I like Ty Tabales a lot. I like what he can bring with his game. I think he's one of those scrappy point guards that's going to be very effective for you down the stretch of the season. And in the little, short stints that I've seen him play this year so far. But no, I have high hopes. I'm not, killing myself over these early losses. I mean they got to be expected. The Valpo, I mean they had the lead at halftime by
They did.
8 point lead at halftime, and Valpo took advantage of some mistakes in the second half. But
Yeah.
as these freshmen kind of develop and get into their, adjusted to the level of college too, that'll be a huge impact on the stretch.
No, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing how they'll do. So, I think that this is going to be a good test for them, especially, get battle tested, face these great teams early, and, hopefully it's kind of a thing where it equals out in conference play and that you can take advantage of it against some of these America East teams. So that's kind of my thoughts there. But Carter, it looks like we're kind of, coming down the final stretch here. It looks like we're up against it and we are officially down to the wire. So we're going to wrap things up really quickly. I just wanted to say, first of all, Carter, thank you for coming on the show. It's been glad to talk with you again. I know I'm going to see you this Sunday down in Hartford, but glad to catch up, man.
Thanks for having me in the pod, Brian. I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk BK and talk about sports, and I love it, man. So yeah, I'll see you down in Hartford this weekend and enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a ton of fun and looking forward to seeing you there. But before we go, if you guys aren't following Down to the Wire yet, make sure you follow us on our streaming platforms. Our Instagram is at down.to-the-wire. Our X, formerly Twitter, is at down_to-the-wire. So you can follow us on there for all updates with the shows, clips, and more. And then, if you want to stream this show, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. So you can find that also by going to the link in the bio of our of our social medias. So you can find us on there. And then finally, if you haven't listened yet, we have a new show that we're also airing on DTW platforms. It's the Bryant Bulldog Sports Hour with 990 WBOB. It airs Mondays from 8 to 9 p.m. on 990. And then we share the recordings of that show on Down to the Wire. So hope you guys take a listen on there. It's a great show. It's great to talk with different coaches, players every week. It's a ton of fun. So we thank you for doing that. But Carter, we're going to sign off now. I'm Brian Costa, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Take care and peace out.